Meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shopta at C70. Still no Alan Medlock, whose season should be wrapping up pretty soon. I need to double check with him, but we'll have him at the beginning of June. Until then, we've still got a good run of guests. And tonight we bring you the voice of VEB, the voice of the Viva El Birdos. It's Jake Wood. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're trying to break up the good guests, and so we brought you on.
Oh, okay. Wow.
No, it's always good to have you in here, and we interact, I think, more than a lot of the guests do because you're on the Discord of the Talking About Birds as well. So we have a chance to go back and forth a little bit there as well. But how is things? How are things? Maybe be a better way to say it. How is the podcast? Everything going well?
Everything's going great. We're actually, we're starting to see some really significant growth from the decisions we've made and the changes that we've made. Whenever we first started doing the show, it was audio only, and with the eye towards eventually getting to a video format. And now we transitioned to that in a very under circumstances that were less than ideal. My computer apparently was not strong enough to handle the software that Riverside uses, and so there was about a 5 or 6 week period where it was substandard to what our standards are for the show were and had established. And so having gotten that taken care of now and starting to really be able to play with the new tools and the things that my computer is now capable of doing, it's just really, really fun and exciting to see where we can take this thing. And it was slow and steady growth there in the first year or so, but things are really starting to pick up now, and it's only going to get better from here, I think.
Yeah, well, good. And I mean, I know that if I tried to, do video, that my audience would evaporate. So I'm glad that it's not done that for y'all. And of course, y'all had some exclusively or very good guests. Some people that have been on here, some people that are around, but some people that you've kind of had to yourself. I mean, Sarah's coming in on last time, as I don't think I've seen him on anybody else's podcast, at least not Cardinal Nation.
Yeah, the really cool thing about VEB is that it established itself as like this, I don't know if force is the right way to say it, but it's well known and well established and well respected. And I look at myself as somewhat of a torch bearer of that. I'm not necessarily trying to come in and put my own, well, I am trying to put my own flair and image on things, but I'm not trying to dramatically change anything. I look at it as I'm just trying to make good on what others who came before me had established. And I thought, my personal thought has always been, if at any point it seems like I'm bastardizing that brand that has been pre-established, then I'll humbly step back and bow out from that. But seemingly surprisingly, everyone has enjoyed what I've done, and everyone that I've talked to or encountered with just about can't wait to see what comes next for us.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be great. And, just having a regular podcast coming out of the VB banner is good. I mean, there have been runs in the past, but it's been a while. And even those were maybe not as regular as y'all have done it. So, yeah, look forward to seeing how that continues to grow as the season goes along. And hopefully there'll be plenty of good things to talk about. Have been so far. But I wonder if we've kind of hitting the edge of maybe the first down cycle. I mean, you look at this, what's coming up, 17 games, a lot of good teams that are going to be facing a lot of travel in those 17. What are you looking for in the near term for this team?
It's a really good question. I think that, the 17 game stretch early on is going to be a really good litmus test for where this team is at right now. I think that, what we've seen the first 25-ish or so games of the season has been, really encouraging.
Mhm.
I think if you would have given truth serum to any Cardinals fan, March 26th, nobody would be saying they saw this coming so far, being 5 games above 500 and staring down the end of April and every team in the NL Central is above 500 for that sake of the matter. I just think that they're really outperforming early expectations. They're really gritty, they're really fun. They have that never say die Cardinal devil magic to them that's really that endearing style of baseball that Cardinals fans love to watch. As far as like this upcoming stretch goes, I think this will tell us a lot, right? I think that
Mhm.
whenever you go up against the Dodgers and the Brewers, and I'm high on the Pirates. I think they have a good squad this year. No real idea of where their ceiling winds up, but I like the collection of talent they have assembled. Whether they come together as a team or not will be yet to be seen. But I think they're going to be the Cardinals are going to be tested really well over this next 2 to 3 week stretch, and if they're able to weather it and maybe just at worst kind of go 500, I think that I don't know that playoffs is realistic this year, but I think we can take them a little bit more seriously if they can just kind of 500 themselves through this stretch.
I mean, yeah, I'm still not gonna. You're right. I don't think anybody should be looking at playoffs. I'm not 100% sure we should even be looking at a 500 record still. It's possible. I think they've put that more on the table with their first start, but we also have to realize, again, Hein Bloom has said long-term gain, short-term pain, if you will.
Sure.
And so when you get to the trade deadline, unless they are, like somehow leading the division, which it seems unlikely, there's a good chance that even a team that's maybe on the fringes is going to start losing Dustin May and Riley O'Brien and, whoever else that the Cardinals might be able to trade away. So, yeah, I don't know, but you're right. It's been fun to see this idea that, you're going to get to probably the 20% mark on a season before they may fall under 500, and you're right, nobody would have predicted that going into this season. So, yeah, it's been fun, and I think we're gonna still have a lot of fun with it going forward, even if they start hitting some rope bumps.
Yeah, for sure. Like, did you coming into the season, a lot of people were so down on for Jordan
Mhm.
Walker of it all, for instance, right? So like, what up until that last week of spring training, everyone was calling for him to start the season in AAA, or some of the like lunatic fringe on the outer edges of the fan base were calling for him to be, designated for assignment or whatever. And I think that a lot of what Jordan Walker was able to do early in the season really helped propel a lot of the good feelings that surround this team, not only with the style of play, but also like seeing that untapped potential start to come to fruition. Started to get fans thinking about what could really be possible for this season.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Jordan Walker because obviously he's been the story of the first 2 weeks, and now he may be starting to be the story of the next week in a different way. He's obviously started to hit a little bit of a wall in his results, and it feels like a little bit in his approach as well. Is there any concern that, this is going to just drop off the face of the earth? Or, I know we're always gonna expect some sort of down slide. He couldn't be, Superman forever. But does it worry you, or do you expect a return?
No, I'm not overly worried at this stage still, because we've seen so much good so
Mhm.
recently. I think that this is just going to be a little bit of who Jordan Walker is, in a sense. I still think there's obviously at 23 years old, there's still more growth, still more maturing, still more taking those next steps forward. But I think that we're finally at a place now, and the results speak for themselves in the first 3 ish weeks of the season, that like that 5 tool superstar type player is in there. What is it about the best players in baseball? You have to get to a certain level of consistency for you to be at the very top of the mountain. And for Jordan Walker, what you're going to start to see is, those stretches. It's going to be streaky. It's going to be stretches of really good, stretches of really bad, and how he is able to kind of narrow down those bad stretches and kind of weather that storm in a sense, is really going to be the defining measuring stick of how Jordan Walker is able to get to whatever potential exists in that incredible frame of his.
Yeah, I was trying to find it because I saw somebody shared it I thought it was in a Discord, maybe in somewhere else, of the heat map of where Jordan Walker's been pitched this year versus in the past. And it's been more, they've people have approached him differently, and we'll start to see maybe them sliding back over like we saw early tonight with Kirby, throwing that pitch that goes out on the other batter's box that he tends to flail at. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to be interesting as well to see how well he adjusts and can start to hold up on some of those things. Um, this last week, I feel like he has been a little bit more free swinging than he probably should be.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have seen him take some of those pitches well that I don't know that we would have in the past. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't know that we'll ever see him get back to that, what home runs in 4 or 5 straight games or whatever. But I think we're going to see a much better Jordan Walker than we have over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Again, it all boils down to consistency. How often is he able to kind of ride out those lows and, get back on track as quickly will be the key to it all.
Yeah. And I guess, put that hand in hand, right? We walked into this season saying we had to see something out of Jordan Walker and we had to see something out of Nolan Gorman. The first couple weeks, we did not see much out of Nolan Gorman, but it starts to feel like maybe we're still not quite seeing the power, but he's had hits in I think his last 3 games is what they're talking about. He's raised his average probably up to about 230 after that double tonight. I don't know that I want to say, hey, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman's fixed or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
there might not be, the trepidation that you see when he walks to the plate.
Mm-hmm. And I look at Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker in sort of somewhat similar lights, right? Like the highs
Mhm,
can be really high and the lows could be really low. It's how do you, kind of try to like level out those lows as best you can to avoid kind of falling into those deep valleys of lack of production. That's really the key with Nolan Gorman. You mentioned it. I think he's got 2 or 3 doubles within the last 3 or 4 games too. So like the
mhm,
doubles power is starting to come in there. He's starting to make better contact. He's staying on the ball better. Whenever he's off, it seems like he's way out in front of everything. And whenever he's on, he's driving pitches back up the middle, and he's even using that left center field gap as well to his advantage. And I think that like him staying, more direct to the baseball, more direct towards the pitcher. Like he shouldn't have to have that feeling like he has to pull and yank everything for it to
mhm,
do damage. He has the ability to do damage to all parts of the field. It's just trusting himself in those lightning quick hands of his, to stay on the pitches and do the damage, to wherever the pitcher throws the ball. And understanding what his strengths are and what pitches he can do damage on, is really just what Nolan needs to focus in on. And on top of that, just to, kind of go one step further, like Nolan Gorman, his defense this year has taken a nice
mhm,
step
mhm,
forward too. And like, I think, along the lines of what we didn't expect coming into the season, I think that's one of those areas where it was like, yeah, maybe hopefully he can kind of be league average, but he's showing to be an above average defensive third baseman. And obviously small sample size guaranteed. And he's, only playing 3 out of 5 games a week defensively, because the other 2 games, whenever Palante and McGreevy are on the mound, he's DHing, so that way they can work Herrera into the game at catcher, and they're all kind of connected in certain ways.
mhm. Yeah, I will say, that has been remarkable. In fact, there was one game not too long ago that they took him out in the 7th inning or something and put Urias in, and, it was like, you don't really have to, if you don't want to. If you're doing it for defensive purposes, Right now, you don't have to do that, because he has played at a level that's been pretty remarkable. I know when he started, he played over at third when Arenado got hurt last year. In those first few games, it was awful. It really was, especially when he had to try to make a throw across the diamond. But he got a little bit better as the season went on, and you're right. This year has been remarkable. When you see his name showing up on defensive, outs above average and things like that, I think some of us are trying to figure out which simulation we're in, because this is not
Mm.
exactly the one that we expect it to be.
Absolutely. And I know that he came into the season this season a little bit more slimmed down too than previous
Mhm.
seasons. Obviously the way the body moves, if you're a little bit Jordan Walker that also falls into this, he slimmed down this offseason as well. The guys are a little bit more svelte, as our good friend Kyle Reese likes to say, moving around the diamond a little bit better, freer, easier, and it just kind of allows him a little bit extra range, a little bit more agility to get to those balls that maybe he, like the edge of the glove, might have just caught and it skips into the outfield. Like now he's actually getting to those baseballs, and it's just been a really nice, unexpected surprise so far this season to see the steps forward defensively.
Yeah, yeah, it's been great. And I mean, because that's the way the Cardinals are going to win ball games, is most likely keeping it close, making the plays that they need to make, and then getting enough offense to do some damage. Um, and so that's that helps a lot. Tonight we saw the shift in center field, and I say that we saw it, it's not necessarily like, oh, this is going to be the thing from now on, but Nathan Church takes over center for Victor Scott II. Probably more of a day off, but there's no doubt that after a really good start to the season in the first couple games, Vic is hit a wall or dropped off a cliff or something, and it just even his approach at the when you look at him in the batter's box, feels like he doesn't really know what he should be doing or what he can do.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. I this week I did a player profile on Victor Scott, and when I looked at like what he did previous season, the previous couple seasons, to like what he's like from an approach standpoint, from where he's setting up in the box standpoint, how he's trying to attack the baseball now. He talked in the offseason about like, trying to go up the middle the other way a lot more with his swings, because that 4-3 ground out to second base, like he can't outrun that ground
Mhm.
out. But if he, hits a ball to third, hits a ball to short, there's a little bit more of an opportunity there where he can kind of beat that out. When you look at like things that Major League Baseball players do really well in baseball today, they're able to pull pitches in the air, and are able to do damage on that. And he has one of the worst, pull air percentages in baseball at like 2.4% total. So like on top of the approach not really like coming to fruition that he was trying to do with the bunting, and trying to find extra offense in other ways, he's also not doing the scant damage that he was last year either. So it's
Mhm.
like it's taking that even more step back in a sense. And like when you look at him from a defensive standpoint, the numbers are down a little bit there as well. The arm strength is way down, almost to the point where you have to wonder about maybe if there's like some dead arm or an injury in there somewhere. But it's really been a really unfortunate step backwards from Victor Scott so far early in the season. And I think you hit the nail on the head with it's just a day off for Victor Scott. Again,
Mhm.
referencing that 17 game streak that they're about to play, 17 games in a row. Like you saw on Wednesday in Miami, them resting Walker and Burleson and Wynn, and they like to really be able to back the days off, or at least group those days off to give a more extended rest period. And perhaps Vic used all of yesterday or perhaps early this morning to kind of work on his swing, and maybe hopefully find something to help him to generate a little more offense going forward, because I do think that he's going to have a long run um, in terms of like the position in center field. I know that management is very high on him. They think very highly of him. They think the ceiling is much higher than obviously what we're seeing so far. And fans will be a lot more ready to move on from that than the Cardinals will likely be, and it will more than likely leave a lot of fans frustrated by watching it on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, this season is about finding out what you have and knowing, what certain players are. And, it might just, who knows, maybe at some point in the middle of June, Victor Scott flips a switch and is
Mm.
hitting, 350 and stealing 40 bags. And all of a sudden we're like, why were we even, doubting this? Like, you just never know. It's baseball. And, sometimes just the smallest little adjustments can change things and send it to a different direction. But we're definitely getting to a point now where we have a decent enough sample size from Vic so far, that it's not trending in the correct direction that we would hope for.
No, and I think David and I talked about this on Gateway this past week, and I'm not double checking the numbers, so maybe it's changed a little bit. But he had 2 stolen bases on opening day and 1 since then. And granted that a lot of that is he's not getting on base, but it
Right.
feels like even when he is, he hasn't necessarily taken the chance. I think he's been caught a couple times, which that happens. But it's just not, again, from that excitement of that first day where he just looked like he was going to be a speed demon, the next coming of Vince Coleman. Again, not getting on base is affecting that a lot. And hopefully so. I do wonder if you're right. It helps the fact that Nathan Church is not necessarily doing a ton either, offensively. He had the big home run in Miami, but um, so he doesn't necessarily have that pressure. But I do wonder if there might be, especially as Jose Fermin continues to
Hmm.
show a little bit at the base on the base at the bat. If there won't be a little bit more mixing and matching in center field, at least for a little bit, and maybe that's just okay, Vic, you're gonna get these. You're gonna work in the cage today, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if there for a stretch there that we won't see a little bit more of Nathan Church in center.
I think that there's going to be a chance for that. I think there's even more of a chance for that once Newt Bar returns at the end of
Yeah.
May, probably beginning of June. I think that will force the issue a little bit more. So that all that to say that I think that you're still going to see Vic, 6 out of 7 games a week, him in center field, and uh, like throughout the duration of at least the month of May. And then from that point, if Nathan Church or Jose Fermin or whoever, I don't think Thomas Ajacey, but who
Mhm.
knows, could steal some reps from Vic in center field, and maybe that timeshare, the timeshare pie starts to get sliced into more even parts as in like a sense. And the Cardinals give a little bit more opportunity to guys who are doing a little bit more with the bat, even if the perceived upside of Victor Scott still might remain higher than the others.
Yeah, hopefully Nick Barr is still on his, May return. I know he was around the ballpark some recently, and I think there's no reason to think he's not. But there also is that, hey, Tommy Edman was supposed to come back about opening day type of thing too. So you do worry until you start seeing some signs that they're going to return. But it does feel like, a couple of weeks ago, we were like, oh, well, when Newt comes back, what are they going to do? Now it seems pretty clear, right? Thomas Ajacey just, for whatever reason, it isn't clicking with him right now. And it feels like it's a pretty easy call to send him back to Memphis for a little while.
Yeah, I don't. I truthfully, it kind of feels like they don't know what to do with Thomas Ajacey. I would have liked to have seen them use him in kind of that Brendan Donovan role where he's getting a start at second base, getting a start at third base, getting a start in left, kind of rotating around it as that rotating off day. And we still might see that. Obviously, it's been a bit of a unique situation with having the one off
Hmm.
day every Thursday so
Yeah.
far, and so maybe we will start to see that just a little bit more in the upcoming portion of the schedule. But I did want to touch back on the Newt Bar of it all. Ollie
Hmm.
Marmol was on Gas House Gang this past Tuesday and did talk about Newt, and his progression is going well, and
Good.
they hope to have more news, or be able to kind of put a timeline on a rehab stint, hopefully by the beginning of this next coming week. So they're looking at that progression continuing on as expected. So I don't necessarily think that we'll see a Tommy Edman situation,
Mm.
thankfully, this year. I think that Newt Bar is on track to kind of be right around that Memorial Day, if not maybe the first week of June.
Yeah, there wasn't much you could do anyway because, you can only have so long on a rehab assignment and he can't come back to the end of May anyway.
Hmm.
So it's not a big, huge surprise, but yeah, it's always good to know. It's always good to get updates, and I don't always get to hear all these weekly hit, but it is good. It is good to know. And I didn't really expect that, but again, until you see those players start coming back, I think it's always in the back of your mind what
Sure.
is actually going on. Probably more so with pitchers and hitters.
Ain't
But
that the truth, brother?
yeah, and we've got, I guess we can use that to shift to talk about the pitching staff because
Do we have to?
I mean, it does feel. I mean, so far, okay, but it does feel like this is a house of, no pun really actually intended, a house of cards that's being stacked up here, and it's about time for a little bit of wind that's going to start shaking these things.
I
Andre Palante pitches pretty well tonight. You get 3 runs in 5 1/3, but you're holding your breath every time pretty much anybody goes out there.
I am just so perplexed as to why. Well, not necessarily, because he hates it, and it's so enjoyable to listen to him hating it. Why you waste all of your great puns and your dad jokes on Kyle Reese whenever I'm sitting right here, and I love them. I want you to set up every single angle with all of your puns. I encourage you to use as many as possible whenever speaking with me.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's Kyle, the hate
I
that I can
know, I
draw
know,
out of Kyle. It strengthens
because
strengthens it all.
because I love it so much, it's not as effective. I understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Going back to Andre Palante of it all, yeah. I listen. Coming into the season, I thought I was probably the high man on Andre Palante. At least,
Mhm.
speaking of him specifically, what at winter warm up, whenever I talked to him, I asked him a question directly because he came into the season. If you remember all the way back to the beginning of 2025, his velocity was down, and I asked him about that, and he talked about the workload from 2024 being so heavy on him that he just had to take additional time to rest and recover in the off season, to where his kind of ramp up and progression was later than normal and usual coming into a regular season, which led to him ramping up later, which led to him having some real issues with like understanding how his arm is coming through and delivering those pitches and finding that release point consistently with the curveball and stuff like that. And so he just kind of described it as like a giant snowball coming into the year last year that just continued to grow and mount. And obviously, it was something that he couldn't really fix in season. It was something that had to be addressed in the off season. And so far, I think one of the best things that Cardinals fans could hope for is that we see more of the 2024 Andre Palante than the 2025 version, obviously, because Palante, when you look at all of the young arms that the Cardinals acquired and have acquired over the last 18 months or so, like you understand that at some point Andre Palante's services are going to no longer be needed, and so
Mhm.
an effective, well pitched Palante is going to be an asset for the Cardinals to be able to use down the road, and perhaps as soon as this trade deadline. Not saying I have any inside information on that. I haven't spoken to anybody about that. That's just kind of my speculation as I see things. Like, who could use a durable 4 or 5 starter at the back end of their rotation to kind of give them some quality innings and a push towards a playoff spot. Like, I think Andre Palante, thinking back to the 2024 version of him, and if he's showing, as he has early this season, that maybe he's kind of getting back to that. That's something that teams will look into. Obviously, he doesn't have the overwhelming swing and miss that you would expect from a frontline starter, but he keeps the ball on the ground. If you have a capable enough defense behind you, he can again fill that fourth, fifth starter role in an admirable way.
You're absolutely right about the swing and miss, and yet somehow he struck out 8 Mariners tonight in 5 1/3 innings, which is probably telling more about the Mariners and their struggles than it is about Andre Palante. But still, very interesting to see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very, of course, all these pitchers, if you put them in a lineup and just use their stats to try to identify them, it's almost impossible because they're about the same. Um, I don't know. I'd be interesting to see, because you're right. Palante does not have a long term role on this team. I don't think. I mean, one of these guys is probably going to be a fifth starter in 2028 or 2029 when the team has got Liam Doyle and all these other pitchers on there. So it could be Palante just as easily as it could be Michael McGreevy or Matthew Liberatore, I guess. But most four of these guys at least are not going to be around probably in 2 years. So it's a little hard to get too attached to them, right? I mean, it's not you don't want to get too invested in them because I mean, one, they're all kind of meh, and then two, they're not necessarily part of the long-term plan.
Daniel, it may be a bit of a crass comparison, but I kind of wonder how much of this 2026 Cardinals team is a bit of a slaughterhouse, right? Like,
Mm.
how many of these cows are being raised for slaughter and sent away and packaged and sent away, for somebody to have their delicious steak on their table at the end of the night to eat? Like, when I think about, like, obviously they're not here long term, but they could be a useful piece for somebody else down the road for whatever they might need. Again, I reference Palante as a 4 or 5 starter. You look at a Dustin May whose like entire existence this season was to
Mhm.
reclaim himself and be moved to a contender. You look at, like, you referenced earlier Riley O'Brien, who's having an absolutely stellar start to this season, and at 31 years old, like, the shelf life for a reliever is already really short. And so
Mhm.
if you're having a relief pitcher who is pitching at the top of the league and you're in a rebuild, there's no sense in holding on to that piece. You want to maximize that piece. You can, like, for as easily as the Cardinals could get a giant return for Riley O'Brien, they're building up enough depth that whenever they're ready to contend again, they could very easily send a piece or two away to solidify their own back end of the bullpen whenever they're ready to contend as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was one that advocated that they trade Ryan Helsley a year before they did,
Great
just because of
example.
the same thing. I mean, you knew that he was at the height of his value. He had another year under contract, um, and he was a little bit older. Obviously, not as old as Riley O'Brien is here. It's a little bit different situation, but yeah, I agree that it's as dominant as Riley O'Brien is, and again, we're talking about this first couple weeks. When it gets to the trade deadline, hopefully he still looks like this, but he very well may not, right? I mean, that's the life of a reliever. Um, but when you're talking about a guy like that, he's not. Yeah, he's just not that focal point. I mean, a Cardinal team that is trying to develop players doesn't have to worry about the whoever's going to close the game. If they were, planning on contending next year, maybe. It's still kind of a little bit iffy just because, there's no guarantee that Riley O'Brien's going to look like this next year. But at least maybe you could make the argument. But being that it's 2 or 3 years down the road before you expect a Cardinal team to be really running, if he can be anything like this close to the trade deadline, um, it would be very strange if Heimblum didn't flip him.
It would certainly be out of character for Heim Bloom to do so. Like, he talked about it at his press conference to begin the offseason. Like, when faced with the decision between short term and long term, we're going to pick the long term every time. And what's more long term focused, hanging on to a reliever who's on the wrong side of 30 years old, that's having a platform season, or sending him away to obtain more high-end assets to add to your collection as you look to build and establish a new frontier of Cardinals baseball, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
to me, it falls so in line with what he has kind of said and spoken about over the last 8 months or so. And truthfully, like, Cardinals fans are going to hate it. I understand. At least, like, the old guard is going to absolutely despise it, because they're going to look at the years of control and say, why are we doing this now? Oh, we just became the Rays. It's just Heim Bloom bringing the Rays over to the Cardinals. We're never going to be. And that's not the reality at all. This is how modern teams operate. This is how modern teams are able to take themselves from the middle or the bottom and work themselves back up with a large pool of talent, and is able to collectively ascend at the same time to once they're all in the major leagues together at the same time, then they will have success together as well. And then you supplement from the outside with the pieces that are remaining. And that is how modern teams construct their rosters nowadays. And so if Chaim Bloom were to, make good on what Riley O'Brien has done over the last 10 months, I look, when I talk about Riley O'Brien, I go all the way back to June 5th of last year. And, like I had put in the bird score, like this is almost 60 innings of Riley O'Brien that we're seeing that, outside of Mason Miller, like there's not really a right-handed reliever that is pitching better or has pitched better than Riley O'Brien has over that stretch. And I think, not to get out over our skis, I don't think that the Cardinals can expect a Leo DeVries in return. Like, I don't think you're getting the best prospect in baseball in return, but I think that perhaps there might be a team who might be desperate enough to give you a top 50 player in all of, a top 50 prospect in all of baseball for Riley O'Brien, because of the amount of control, because of the effectiveness he has had. Like, I think that there exists an opportunity where the Cardinals can take that another big, meaningful step in their rebuild by trading a Riley O'Brien for a meaningful piece. What if the Cardinals were able to land, an actual center fielder of the future? What if the Cardinals were able to get, like, just for speculation example, like an Eduardo Quintero from the Dodgers, right? They just saw Edwin Diaz go down with surgery for loose bodies in his elbow. What if the Dodgers say, screw it, we're going for it anyway, and they have a plethora of starting outfielders. Quintero is, projected to be this great center, this 5-tool center fielder in their system. Like, could the Cardinals go and pluck him because they have so much other surplus outfield depth? And, for those of us who are so, like, already tired of the Victor Scott experience, like, you could kind of start to talk yourself into how that would make a lot of sense, because you would get that potential 5-star center fielder, that 5-tool center fielder to play and be up the middle and grow with a Wynn and a Weatherholt and, whoever ends up at catcher, whether it be Crooks or Bernal or Rodriguez or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on who else is on the market at the deadline and everything like that. But if O'Brien looks similar to what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and if he is the best available, then yeah, there is a good chance to be able to get something of significance back. And we've seen Chaim Bloom do a pretty good job of making trades. So at least it seems like, again, most of these guys that he's traded for still are in the growing stage. We haven't seen a lot of them yet, but it definitely feels like he's got a pretty good hand at doing this. So yeah, I think, and again, it's going to be, I don't want to say that it's going to be anything that's not nailed down, but it's going to be pretty close, right? I mean, if Dustin May, again, that's why they brought in Dustin May. That's why they brought in Ryan Stanek, and we'll see if there's any value there. When the trade deadline comes, people are always looking for some sort of veteran reliever, even if he walks everybody in sight.
Nobody's saying Ryan Stanek. We would never say the name Ryan Stanek. Ryan Stanek is probably who you're talking about, Ryan Stanek.
Maybe, but I don't know. Could be somebody else, or maybe we just need to shave his head. Maybe that's the problem.
Oh, here we go. Here's the old man yelling at clouds thing. All right. Yeah. Cut your hair, you hooligan. All right. I get it.
I mean, just saying, it could be distracting.
How long is your hair, Daniel? We can't see you right now. How long is your hair?
Not that long, and getting short, getting smaller by the day.
I feel like I remember the last time I saw you, it was getting pretty long there. I can't grow hair, so I wouldn't know what that's like.
Well, I'm starting to get that way as well, so that's the problem. But anyway, I'm not saying he has to. I'm just saying, maybe, if it was working, that's fine. It's not necessarily working right now, so why not try anything? Baseball players are superstitious. You never know what they might try.
He looks like a rock star with that long, flowing, greasy hair. Let him do his thing. Let him walk the world and maybe strike out one or two guys, and hopefully the Cardinals can get a lottery prospect for him.
He's got the control of a rock star as well. So anyway, Matthew Liberatore, Michael McGreevy, we haven't touched on them. Again, I don't know that there's a whole lot to say about it. McGreevy's been better than I expected. I will give him that. And he's gone deeper into some games. He's been able to keep people off balance. I'm still not 100% sure how long that lasts, but it's nice to see at least, somebody maybe overperforming.
Yeah, for sure. The one word that comes to mind when I think of Michael McGreevy is pitch maker, right? Like he doesn't do anything to overwhelm you or wow you, but whenever he really needs to execute, whenever he's excuse me, whenever he's in that situation in a tight spot or he's trying to put a batter away, he generally is able to execute and make his pitch and do his thing. So when I think of Michael McGreevy, that dude's just a pitch maker. He does his job. And it's really fun to watch for me. When I think of Matthew Liberatore, I had higher expectations coming into the season than kind of what he's shown so far, and I
Mhm.
still think that at some point he will take that next step up and forward to kind of assert himself as a real top of the rotation type arm. Right now, he's kind of pitching as more of a mid to back end rotation arm, and again, I still think that there's more in him that he's capable of than what he has shown so far. And so I'm anxious to see, especially as the Cardinals, I wonder if he's someone who pitches up and down to competition. And that's not me like taking a shot at him. It's just, some guys are wired that way. And so I wonder if over this next, 17 game stretch where the Cardinals are facing a lot of teams who are projected to be like playoff caliber, teams, I wonder if there's a little extra juice behind, what he's throwing and how he performs. So like I'm going to be extra intrigued to watch his starts over the next couple weeks for sure.
That's an interesting idea. I don't know. I mean, it's very possible. I guess you're right. Some people are like that. Just looking at his game log, I mean, his best, he had a one run over five against Tampa Bay, a team that he obviously had some motivation against. One run over six against the Mets, and then one run over six in Houston, which is pretty impressive. It's just been those two middle starts against the Nationals and the Guardians that he kind of struggled, at least in the results. Now, again, we can talk about um, all the metrics and all the, what his pitches are looking like and all that kind of stuff too. But, just basic results, a 3.67 ERA right now is, you know, for a team that's rebuilding and for a team that doesn't really have a identity on the mound, it's not terrible.
It's fine, and again, like I kind of think that he's capable of 3-2 or below, and that's a high bar to set. But again, I don't think that I think you would agree that we have not seen the best of Matthew Liberatore so far this season, and so that does leave that extra room for him to get to that marker, that 3-2 or below in terms of ERA. And so, again, I'm eager to see what he does against some of the more high octane offenses over the next couple of weeks.
I will say it is also fair to note that his FIP is 548, so he has pitched a little bit, has had better results than some things would indicate. But yeah, I think it'll be. I mean, this is a big test for everybody. You going into, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of good teams yet. The Cardinals have faced a lot of teams that you thought might be all right, and the Guardians were, you know, should be better than they are. Houston, we thought was going to be better. The Mets are a whole different story in and of itself. Um, but to get a chance to see, you're right, a surging Pittsburgh team, the Dodgers, who are the Dodgers, the Brewers, who are the Brewers, making a trip out to San Diego, and then to play the A's as well. There's you're going to find out a lot about this team. And if they're when we're kind of going back to where we started at, but both as a team, but as a lot of individuals, the mood and tone is going to be probably somewhat different after this stretch, and hopefully it's not a hey, this is better than we thought, not yeah, here we go.
Yeah, for sure. Like, to bring it full circle, like again, if the Cardinals wind up going roughly 500 on this stretch and, come out on the other end still above 500, I think that, a lot of Cardinals fans are going to wind up being really pleased with where this team is, even if that means like 2-3 months down the road that, all of these short-term assets wind up getting moved regardless of team performance.
And in this stretch, it seems likely, it may not be till the second time through, but it seems likely we'll get the promotion of Hunter Dobbins to the major league team. And maybe it's a six-man rotation for a while. Who knows what? But, I mean, there is that, I hate to use a term from a different sport, a little bit of a backup quarterback idea, right? That this idea that Hunter Dobbins is really, really good, which he very well may be, but we haven't had a chance to see him yet because, coming over to trade and then having this injury. What do you expect out of him? I mean, first off, like right out of the gate and then going through the season.
Well, Daniel, to tell you the truth, I don't really know exactly what to expect from him right out of the gate. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. I know he has some pedigree to his name, and so obviously I expect him to go out and compete and give the team the very best that he can. I know that Jeff Jones had posted that if Hunter Dobbins does come in to the rotation, it might be later on in this 17 game stretch, so don't look for it to be an immediate thing. I kind of wonder if he might fill a bit of the Michael McGreevy role from last year, where they'll just pop him up for a quick spot start and then send him right back down, and can I maneuver it that way? I think that a lot of fans will again be frustrated by that decision. I don't think that we've seen the very best performances out of the one starter that we haven't named by name yet. That's Kyle Leahy. And, I think that if this were a season where the Cardinals were pushing towards the playoffs and want to have the very best, players for in the roles that they would do the best at right now, I think Leahy would be in the bullpen pitching that multi-inning bridge role that he pitched last season. But the Cardinals see more in Leahy than they do, just the 1 to 2 innings reliever and kind of that's it. And so they're really giving Leahy the run and the rope and the I'm not going to use the other R word that explains long opportunity for Cardinals players, but I think that
like a plane taking off, it's almost
yes,
like
that there is adequate taxiing to the tarmac. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's taken on a life of its own. Anyway, so to get back to Kyle Leahy, or to Hunter Dobbins, I should say, I think that he might wind up fitting that Michael McGreevy role from a year ago, where he pops up, kind of gives the guys a little extra breather, and then he'll go right back down. He's still got 2 option years left remaining. I get that they probably didn't. I understand the not wanting to burn the extra option year, but if you've got it, I don't understand why you would hesitate to use it, especially if it's not like, because it wouldn't be his last one, because he would have another one going forward. He still would remain with flexibility going forward. And so I don't know. For me, the way that it's all starting to line up, it kind of seems like Dobbins will fit that McGreevy role until like Eric Fetty of last year, where Dustin May gets traded at the deadline, then Dobbins gets installed in there full time.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, I have never been big on the Leahy experiment, and think that I don't know how well it's going to work in general, but I also know that the Cardinals are very committed to it, and it feels unlikely that they would pull the plug on that just a month into the season. I think that they would want to do more, like you were saying. So it does feel, unless unless somebody gets hurt, which is the thing that the Cardinals did not have to worry about last year, and have had fortunately not really had to worry about this year so far. But barring injury, it does feel like it's going to be very difficult for him to crack that, unless they decide, maybe that they do need something out of the bullpen, which could be even him, right? He could come up and then stay up and kind of do that swingman Steven Matz type of thing. I don't think they would do that, but you never know.
Well, I do know from a different show, I want to reference Redbirds on the Arch, Tyler Gettinger, who does his Redbird farm hands. They do a great job. They had Hunter Dobbins on their show, actually, which was a terrific get. And, absolutely kudos to those guys. But Hunter talked about his body not being able to respond well to relief work. So I would not expect to see Hunter Dobbins in anything other than a starter's workload. And the fact that he's so publicly forthcoming with that information would tell me that that's a pretty safe bet going forward.
Yeah, that's fair. In which case, maybe they do that with a Palante or something like that, but it very well may be. You're right. There's not any real desire not to burn an option on him, I wouldn't think. And you have to do what you have to do.
And if
So
you're
I don't
looking
know.
for sacrificial lambs like that, you can look to a Bruce Zimmerman or a Jared Schuster. That's the
Right.
whole like existence for those guys, is to just come up, pitch bulk innings out of the bullpen and then be designated for assignment and fungibly just shifted back and forth between Memphis and St. Louis. And if somebody decides they want to put a claim in on him, great. Like, we'll move on to the next guy.
Little known fact is that Jared Schuster's cousin is Taylor Motter. So I expect that him to be continually up and down
It will
with that knee
never
problem.
will never escape Taylor Motter.
No, not likely. I think he might be still at the stadium for all I know.
He's in
But
disguise.
anyway,
He's actually Gersh.
yeah, that's Gersh's special project is to keep
Mm.
Taylor Motter as far away from
Hmm.
the roster as possible, and it's a full time job. Full time job. All right. Well, let's see. I mean, trying to think what else we could cover. I think we've kind of touched on most of the big things. Um, I do know, from my little kind of casual watching, it feels like Joshua Baez is heating up a little bit down in Memphis. Do you expect that he will make that a conversation about his promotion, maybe even by the end of this 17-game stretch?
I think he'll make it more of a conversation with fans than he will with the front office. And that's kind of a
Mm,
through line theme, I think, with a lot of this, is like fans are still working on calibrating their expectations for the season as opposed to what they've experienced over the last 30 years of Major League Baseball, right? It's so hard. Like, I don't know if I could compare the Cardinals to like smoking cigarettes, but obviously it's like it's an addiction that's so hard to quit because you're so like predispositioned to thinking about things a certain way. So like thinking about the Cardinals continuously contending, continuously trying to put their absolute best foot forward and trying to scratch and claw, to use a Mike Schiltism, to win every single game as possible. Like, for the Cardinals, I think that opportunity is going to come for Josh Baez whenever opportunity opens up. So like
mm.
what I'm looking at is probably the last 2 months of the season for Josh Baez, and I hope that he absolutely smokes the snot out of the baseball for the first 4 months of the season, and then comes up after Nootbaar is traded and just goes on a tear down the stretch. Like that would I would love nothing more than to watch that this year. I know Cardinals fans would have different takes on that. They would like to
Mhm.
see Baez up here as soon as possible, and they're tired of watching Nathan Church, Jose Fermin, Victor Scott all at once. And I understand, the thought process and the philosophy behind those feelings, but at the same time, we have to remember to be gauging our own expectations with how the organization has set them to be. And as we look forward, like how I always try to look at situations through two lenses. Is like, one is like, how would I want to be approached, and then how do I think that the organization is going to approach it? And I always try to let that second element try to dictate the first one a lot more. Is like, how do I see Heim Bloom, or in previous seasons, how do I see Mo like attacking this, or thinking through this? And so like, if I use that as a general guide, I'm generally in the right direction more often than not. And so, how would I think that Bloom would want to approach this? We know that Bloom tends to like to overcook his prospects and likes to give them additional development time, even after they seem to show that they're ready for the next step. And so, I think that Baez could go on a monster run, and he's still going to wind up staying in AAA for an extended time until there is a more fine, um, not finite, what's the word I'm looking for, like cemented role in the outfield going forward.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably fair too. But, and again, Newt Bar continues to throw the wrinkle in that because he's going to need that spot on the roster. He's going to need playing time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not going to be a spot if you are continuing to work on Nathan Church and work on Victor Scott and work on Jordan Walker. There's not going to be a spot for Joshua Baez. So I agree. It will probably take that kind of thing, and we've seen it. I mean, we saw it a lot with Mo too. But we've seen prospects just dominate and not get the call. because of whatever reasons. And I think that that's very likely to be the case here as well. Well, Jake, it has been fun. It has been an enjoyable thing. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you would like to?
Yeah, Daniel, you didn't ask me the question you've asked every single guest you've had on so far.
To be fair, if you would pay attention, since the season started, I really haven't. But I will ask you the question anyway, just because. And if there is somebody, because again, once now that we've spent the whole, have had a month under our belts, we've probably it's maybe it changes, maybe it doesn't. What player are you paying attention to the most this summer?
Daniel, I'm paying the most attention to, and it's no surprise, it's Jordan Walker, right? So when you think about any player on the roster who's more capable of impacting with all 5 tools of in the game, it's Jordan Walker. He has the ability to hit for average, hit for power. He has the ability to run well above average. He's fielding the ball at a much higher rate now, and he's fast as hell, right? So like there are so many elements to Jordan Walker's game, and he's able to impact the game in so many different ways. And you saw it at the early part of this season. Whenever Jordan Walker is right, whenever Jordan Walker is just touching his potential, it changes the outlook and the landscape of the team as a whole. And so if there was one singular player at the major league level who could expedite or change increase the likelihood that this team is better or sooner than we expected, it's Jordan Walker.
Yeah, and fascinating. Just looking at my list here of people that have been selected over this whole experiment, you're only the second person that put Jordan Walker, which is a little bit interesting. And the other one was Jeff Jones, who I had to go back and ask the question if we didn't get it on air. But and yeah, I mean, looking in retrospect, and even at the time, I'm a little bit surprised we didn't have a few more of that being the answer. Of course, Weatherholt and Wynn and things, and even Gorman kind of popped in there, and then there's Scott Plaza looking at Blaze Jordan, but it's close, I guess. So anyway, yeah, so that's very interesting. It kind of is interesting that I mean, you're right. I mean, it's and we've seen it. We've seen how, I mean, this team's not 4 games over 500 if Jordan Walker hits even half of what he has hit right now, right? I mean, this team goes most likely the way Jordan Walker goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is, again, a little bit, disturbing. It gets you a little bit scared about this little slump that he's in, and hopefully somebody will pick up the slack, at least for the short term. So, all right. Well, next week we have our old friend, and I can say that because he's older than me, Richard McGill, coming in to talk about the team. We'll also have a conversations with C70 this week, probably on Monday. So until then, for Jake, I'm Daniel. Good night.
This series has been void of bad blood probably until the end of the night last night. And there's Dusty Baker and Tony La Russa. They've had their issues with one another over the years.
Well, I'm really stunned that a war of words would actually cause the benches to empty before they get going in the bottom of the first inning. Obviously, some discourse between Yadier Molina and Brandon Phillips sparked the whole thing. We won't know until after a game exactly what was said. Now Scott Rowland is getting into it.
And now it is turning ugly.
With Chris Carpenter. And Carpenter's the one down there chirping.
Carpenter had issues with his own teammates last night. And it is getting really ugly as we've got punches and kicks. Johnny Cueto, the starting pitcher, is being wrestled away.
And this is not good at all, because this is the kind of situation where somebody can get up, get hurt, get their finger stepped on, and it's just not baseball.